Hello, viewers. As you know, I enjoy interviewing those who, like me, have a background with the Jehovah's Witness religion, and my guest today is no different. He is, however, the host of a huge channel here on YouTube, which I thoroughly am a fan of. I'm delighted to introduce to the John Cedars channel, Telltale.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here.
So Telltale, your channel is quite a phenomenon in terms of how quickly it's grown, particularly over the last few months. You and I know that a heck of a lot of work goes into making videos, and that doesn't get seen by everyone. But it can be very rewarding when the video itself is seen by lots of people. So have you been surprised or pleased by the way your channel has taken off?
I have. I think that a lot of this whole YouTube thing is partly due, like my explosion, if you'd call it that, it's partly due to the market to which I have appealed since day one. Like, I started out trying to appeal to not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but also atheists and some other markets in addition to that. And I made friends with a lot of people in those markets. And of course, at the time, there was kind of a vacuum that was taking place in the atheist YouTuber market for one reason or another. And just, it was a perfect storm where eventually, you know, a lot of people just kind of came to my channel all at once. That was the result. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with the outcome there. And I'm really happy that I am where I am. I'm so glad that eventually I had the opportunity to give Jehovah's Witnesses the coverage. I honestly didn't think anybody was going to be interested in Jehovah's Witness content at first, but I made it anyways because I liked talking about it. And it just so happened to be my most popular videos were about Jehovah's Witnesses. So yeah, it worked out in the end.
Was there any particular, because there's been times in the history of my channel where I've made a particular video or something in particular has happened and it's just kind of shifted things forward. Was there any particular thing that you did that you can look back and think, yeah, maybe that played a part in things really going?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. One of the main things I think that played a part was when I brought my daughter on. I had her kind of talk about, you know, she helped me debunk one of the Caleb and Sophia videos, and people loved that. You know, they just thought it was the cutest thing. And it was perfect because at the time I was really trying to deprogram her because my mom had kind of convinced her that baptism with Jehovah's Witnesses was the only way. That's what she should be doing and all that stuff. I think she was like 7 or something. And I was really concerned. So I was kind of getting her involved in my channel and things like that. And people loved it and she loved it and I loved it. So it worked out.
Perfect. So I guess one thing that I'm a little bit sketchy on is your personal journey and your history with the witnesses. So maybe we can kind of hit rewind and go back to the beginning of how you became embroiled in the religion to begin with.
Sure. So I was born into it. I'm thinking, how far back do we want to go? I was born.
I think being born is a good beginning.
Right. So yeah, I was born into it. Both my parents were in the Air Force, and that's where they met. And eventually they ended up studying with a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they ended up getting baptized, both of them. I have 2 brothers and a sister. My oldest brother and sister, they were not born in it, but my next oldest brother and we were both born in it. So yeah, so time passes, and my siblings are significantly older than I am. So they all ended up moving out when I was about 12, and it was just me and my parents from that time on. And I just threw myself into the religion. I mean, face first. That's around the time I got baptized. Nobody else in the congregation was getting baptized. I think I was the first, or maybe the second, but I was setting a trend either way. And so yeah, I ended up getting baptized and really devoted myself to the whole thing. And time passes. I ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia for a little while. This is a bit I've never really talked about on my channel, but ended up moving to Atlanta.
Exclusive.
Yeah, it's exclusive. I ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia for a little while with my older brother, and Jehovah's Witness took me under his wing. He was a plumber and he was teaching me plumbing, so I didn't have to go to college and things like that. And that was like my life goal, was to become a plumber. And eventually I ended up moving back to West Virginia and getting a worldly girlfriend. This was when I was about 17, so years had passed and things had started kind of tuckering out a little bit on the Jehovah's Witness front. So I ended up getting a worldly girlfriend. And when I told her my aspirations for my life, I want to be a plumber, she was like, why? I mean, you're 17, you can go to college, you know? And I was like, I just thought there was something so noble about that pursuit. Now, don't get me wrong. Plumbing is a fine job. Electrician's a fine job. These are all fine jobs.
I really struggle to find a plumber where I live in Croatia. So
I know. And it pays an insane amount of money. Like plumbing actually pays more money than I've ever made in my life. So that, you know, there is a market for that, but I could have gone to college. That was an option at that age. And I had I'd been convinced that it was not the way to go. So anyway, long story short, I end up, so I was going to high school at the time, and I had this worldly girlfriend, as I mentioned, and some kids from the congregation were kind of watching me and ratting on me, like telling the elders what I was doing. I don't know why. Maybe they were asked to, maybe they decided to, but either way.
Well, that perfectly describes JW culture, doesn't it? You're supposed to do that. You're in fact instructed to do it in some talks. So.
Yep, that's true. You are. You're instructed to do it. So they were doing the right thing as they saw it. So they ended up, I guess you could say, ratting on me and telling the elders everything they saw, me holding her hand and the whole 9 yards, you know, scandalous. But so anyways, I end up they set up a judicial committee to kind of figure out what I had been doing, like what was going wrong here. And I just came clean about the whole thing. I can't blame all of the issues that I've had in my life on Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't feel like I can do that in good conscience. Some of it was just my parents being my parents, who they are. But Jehovah's Witnesses definitely did play a big part in it. So I ended up going kind of over the deep end after leaving the religion, for lack of a better term, and I ended up getting into alcohol and things like that, and, you know, the girlfriend thing. And so when I went to the judicial committee, I just told them that everything that I'd done. I just came clean about every sin that I have committed, pretty much. And which I had smoked a cigarette at the time. And that was a pretty big deal, obviously. Your viewers will know that that's a big deal. That's not a little thing.
To a non-Jehovah's Witness, that's the most uneventful thing you could possibly imagine. But to a Jehovah's Witness, that's, unbelievable. Yeah. He smoked a cigarette. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'd smoked a cigarette and I had been drinking alcohol. Of course, I was 18, I think. So, you know, against the law to have been drinking alcohol at the time. I had a girlfriend and all that good stuff. So I ended up telling the elders everything. And I said, I really want to continue being a part of this. I don't want to leave the religion. And I feel like my life is kind of at a crossroads at this moment. If you disfellowship me, I might not come back. I really want you guys to just, you know, give me another chance here. It's probably the wrong thing to say in retrospect. But anyways, that's what I said. And they end up, they sent me outside. I'm just kind of standing out there waiting for them to deliberate. And so they call me back inside and they say, we're gonna have to disfellowship you. Now, like I said, in retrospect, that ended up being the best thing to ever happen to me. Little did I know, but for the following 2 years, so at that point, my parents I had nowhere to live. That was it. This is my 18th birthday. My mom told me to leave the house. And I didn't have a house to go to after that. Where was I going to go? So
it was
I had
on your 18th birthday that you were told to leave.
Yes.
Or thereabouts.
I wasn't disfellowshipped on my 18th birthday, but it was that day that I was told to leave.
Wow.
So I knew this girl from school, from high school, and I ended up going to her house and crawling in her window at her house. And her parents, well, her grandparents who she lived with, they didn't know or any of this. So I climbed in her window and I lived in her bedroom for like 2 or 3 weeks because I had nowhere else to go. It was either that or living on the street. So I ended up, I worked at Burger King at the time, and I had worked there for like a year. It'd been a while. So I ended up saving up enough money, and I knew a guy who worked there with me who had a trailer, and he offered to rent me a room. So I ended up moving in with him for like $150 a month or something like that. And so, yeah, I end up kind of getting back on my feet little by little.
But you started out from the sounds of things from rock bottom. It doesn't get much worse than that. I mean, I've obviously been myself jettisoned from the organization. I was disassociated rather than disfellowshipped, which is more or less the same thing, but it had no real impact on my kind of day-to-day existence. You were literally thrown out from your family home with no care for the fact that you had nowhere to go.
That's true. So in your case, I think that you were more embroiled in that lifestyle because you'd been in it for a lot longer than I was. I mean, I think I was like 13 when I got baptized or something. You got baptized pretty early, didn't you?
11, yeah.
Okay, and you were an elder for a while. I mean, when did you end up leaving?
Well, I got disassociated when I was married, but so you were still very young. You got kicked when I was 18. I hadn't even yet been appointed a ministerial servant, so 18 for me was still very, very early in the journey. I hadn't even started having my initial doubts at that point, but it just astonishes me because you hear these horror stories of, I mean, you even see it in the artwork that Watchtower has in its publications of teenagers with their bags packed, going out the door with their parents in tears. And you think, well, gosh, I really hope that literal situation isn't happening. But then, of course, you come across stories like yours where it has happened. By the time I'd left the organization, I was married, I had my own house that I could go back to. You had nowhere. And so I think just purely from a logistical kind of humanitarian point of view, it's one of the most kind of disgraceful elements of this policy.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. So you were more embroiled in the lifestyle. Like you said, that was pretty early in the journey for you at 18. I feel like I was fully committed by that point, or at some point in my life, I was fully committed to that religion completely. Of course, I'd never been a ministerial servant or any of that good stuff. I was carrying microphones and I was giving talks and things like that. But, it wasn't so much a loss of the lifestyle, not so much as a loss of friends and family. That was the issue for me, where I think it was a loss of lifestyle with you, where, your whole life had just been completely turned upside down. Everything is changing, things like that.
Well, my dad sent me an email on the night of the Judicial Committee saying, from now on, we're not going to be talking.
That
so
is very true.
It did impact me in a way, but I just think it's just such a cruel thing to do to a teenager. It is. Basically.
It is. So back to the story. I ended up You know, I was living with this girl for a few weeks, and I ended up moving into this guy's trailer. Lived there for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. And you know, he was a worldly person in the truest sense of the term. So he was into drugs and things like that, and I ended up getting into that life a little bit. And so I ended up like I found my way out of that life eventually, after a couple of years. And so time passes.
But
and
in a way, sorry, just to kind of, I hate to kind of cut you off, but
no, it's fine.
What I find fascinating is that how self-defeating all of this is, because you'd made it clear to the elders, look, if you guys get rid of me, I could very well never come back. I really want to believe this. Help me believe it. They had your mind at that point, and if they'd have made a different decision, you could still be a Jehovah's Witness now.
I probably would be.
But what amazes me is that instead of doing that, they were so cruel as to not only disfellowship you, but your family implement that decision to the point of turfing you out. And that had the effect of getting you in with, quote unquote, the wrong crowd, so that the things that you were originally disfellowshipped for only got added to. They actually kind of helped in making your kind of rap sheet even longer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. And what I find fascinating is the fact that they say they're doing this for the disfellowshipped person, right? They're saying, we want to help them. We want to help them come back. So if we talk to them, they'll have no reason to come back. Well, I thought the reason was supposed to be because I believe it. I thought the reason was supposed to be because God, you know, Jehovah is here for me, and I want to come back to Jehovah. Not because you're holding my family hostage. That completely changes the dynamic all of a sudden. And they admit it. It's not even like I would hide that if I were the governing body. I would not come out and say that. That's ridiculous. So anyways, so I ended up getting into drugs a little bit. A couple years later, my sister was still in it. So all of my siblings were still in it, right? I think this was 2011. I was talking to my sister and her husband at the time a little bit. They were, like I said, they're still in it, but they were kind of not great witnesses. So I start talking to her husband, and he's telling me, like, did you know that I think it was Joseph Rutherford built this mansion that he lived in, and, you know, and he deeded it to like Abraham and everybody. And I was like, really? That's so crazy. And I don't know. I mean, it seems like such a silly thing to have, such a silly straw to have broke the camel's back. But that was the one thing that got me thinking. And I was like, this is BS. I don't think I believe any of this. And of course, I
think that's quite a good straw, though, because the Beth Sarim story, I mean, it's silly, I know, but that's the whole point. How could someone who is supposed to have been not just a member of the Faithful and Discreet Slave, but he's now considered to be the first or one of the first members of the Faithful and Discreet Slave, and here he is deeding buildings to Bible characters.
That's true.
Who he believes are going to be resurrected before Armageddon. And it has to raise a few question marks when you think it through.
Yeah, that's true, especially because the literature always talks about what a great guy he was. And once you realize that he had like 30 cars or something during the Great Depression in the US and this giant mansion and everything, he's just using these people's money and kind of putting it in the name of helping these Bible characters when they come back. You know, you just realize that he was not a fantastic person like they said. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, they've been lying about that, period. I mean, that's the bottom line. They lied about that. I know that now. So what else did they lie about? And that was kind of the door. You know, like I said, I've been disfellowshipped for years at this point. I was fighting with the mother of my kid over whether or not my mom was going to be allowed to take my kid to the meetings. I wanted my mom to teach her about Jehovah's Witnesses for the first year or two of her life. So I was fighting the mom over this issue. And that was the thing that finally, made me start questioning. And of course, once I realized, I'd grown up realizing that, or
Sorry,
being
just
told
to,
at
just
least.
to clarify something,
Mhm.
how because I'm unclear on this. How is it that your mother was? If you kind of went away, I'm unclear about how you got from going off into this kind of life of debauchery, quote unquote,
Right.
to having a child with whose mother is a Jehovah's Witness.
Okay. So the girl whose window I climbed in when I was
Right.
18,
Yeah.
I ended up getting married to her. And
Right.
and it wasn't much long after that. I ended up marrying her because I didn't want to be living this life of debauchery anymore. I wanted
Right.
to be in line with Jehovah's principles and all that stuff. Even though I was disfellowshipped already and all that other stuff, I wanted to get my life to a point where I wasn't breaking any rules. So I ended up getting married to her. I think it was 9 months after I got disfellowship. So 9 months after my 18th birthday is actually when I got married to her. And then I ended up having a kid exactly to the day 9 months after we got married. So that was interesting timing. But
You didn't waste any
anyways,
time there, did you?
no. So anyways, I ended up having Kylie, as my fans will know her. It's Alpha Force Zero. But anyways, I ended up having Kylie. And yeah, so my mom was kind of teaching her a little bit for the first year or two, and I was okay with it. But as time went on, I since I'd been growing up, I'd been told that all other religions are garbage. They're all BS. They're all false. They're all evil in one way or another. Catholics and Pentecostals, Baptists, Methodists, all of them. They're all wrong and they're all evil. All that, right? And so when I realized that Jehovah's Witnesses were full of it, I just defaulted to not believing anything. Like there was just nothing else to believe in. I already didn't believe in all these others, which a lot of the time when somebody has an issue with something that their church says, they'll just go to another church. It's no big deal. Or they'll, if they don't agree with the Baptist ideals anymore, they'll just turn Methodist, something like that. It's not as big of a deal because they're not being excommunicated usually when they leave. So I think that their excommunication of me, my disfellowshipping, that is the reason why I'm not Jehovah's Witness now. I could very well imagine a scenario in which I'm still Jehovah's Witness. And I can tell you that there's just no way that I would be in as good a position in my life as I am now if I had stayed in, because it teaches you to not want money almost. It teaches you that money is evil and things are evil. You should give everything up and pioneer and throw everything you have into the, into the religion. Well, since leaving, I've realized that that's not the only way. I can have an appreciation for things if I want, and that's okay. I mean, right behind me, you can see a collection of retro games. I love collecting retro games. That's something that I would very well be talked to about if I were still Jehovah's Witness. I would not be able to collect things like that. That serves no purpose for me since Armageddon's right around the corner. So anyway, that's the bottom line with my story. I'm just glad that I found my way out.
Just to clarify another point, so the girl whose window you climbed into and you ended up getting married, am I right in saying that she became a witness?
Oh no.
No, okay.
No.
Because I'm just confused about you saying that there's been a bit of difficulty with your child being indoctrinated. Is that
right.
Purely from your mother trying to
indoctrinate? So yes, it was purely from my mother. So my ex-wife now,
Right.
We are, well, technically we're still married. We're really good friends. She and I have separate lives, so we aren't together anymore. Anyway,
Right.
she, I guess she kind of believed in some kind of spirit, some kind of force, but she never really called it God growing up. She was not hardcore religious. It wasn't really like that for her. So when I came into her life and my mom was trying to teach Kylie about Jehovah's Witnesses, my ex was unhappy about that. She knew they were fundamentalists. She knew they were extremists, and she didn't want her daughter growing up that way. Eventually, what ended up happening was, I realized that it was BS, and I ended up moving away from it. But her family, my ex-wife's family, they took me in and cared for me as if they were my own family. They replaced the family that I lost. And I feel like it's something I didn't experience before them, is having a family, because it's like you've always got this this fear sitting on the edge. It's like the love here is conditional. This is conditional. It's conditional on the condition that you continue going to the meetings and continue doing this thing and that thing, going in service. The moment you stop that, your family takes their love back. They withhold it in hopes that you'll continue doing what they want you to do. As far as I'm concerned, that is not love. That's not how love is supposed to work. And I learned that for the first time in my 20s from Kylie's grandparents and great-grandparents. So not everybody has that experience, and I can't describe how lucky I am to have somebody like that who cares about me. I actually recently told them, I don't know, like 6 months ago or something, that I climbed in her window and lived in her bedroom for like 3 weeks, because I had nowhere else to go. And they were like, oh, 10 years
sorry,
ago.
not sorry.
Yeah. I mean, they were okay with it. It's been 10 years and they trust me. They know who I am, but it is funny. They support me in everything. So I am very lucky in that sense.
One thing that I think people watching this maybe don't quite grasp, who've never been Jehovah's Witnesses, is they may say, well, you talk about shunning, but kind of get over it because you've managed to get out. You're both kind of living happy, contented lives. So okay, it happened, but move on. And I certainly, in my case, I'm interested in hearing your side. Shunning is a punishment that continues to radiate against you for years or even decades. You still feel its effects in your life, in the things that aren't happening, the moments that never get to happen because of relatives who aren't a part of your life. In my own case, Jessica, my 4-year-old daughter, hasn't met her grandfather yet. She has an aunt and 2 cousins who she's never met, which I feel is very closely to do with the shunning. So how would you say that shunning impacts on you, even though you've stopped believing on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, it definitely affects my life heavily. So like I said, my mom was trying to indoctrinate Kylie for many years. In fact, she still is. I kind of, before I tell this story, I want to mention, even if it weren't affecting my life, it is affecting other people's lives. Right now, Monday at 11:10 a.m., there's a pioneer out there. Okay, 11:10 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. There's a pioneer out there somewhere who is just getting out of the car, going into a Tim Hortons or a Dunkin' Donuts or something, and thinking to himself, I don't believe any of this. This is garbage. and I can't tell anybody. I have to keep doing this. It isn't about my pain or my anger at this thing or that thing or being shunned or how it affects my life. Ultimately, it's for everybody around me who's going through this and who will continue to go through this. 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, are out there. Until every one of them are out of that religion, I will always have something to say about this religion. But as far as my life, it is affecting my life. So it isn't about getting over it. For all intents and purposes, I've gotten over it. It's for everybody else, but it does still affect my life in many adverse ways. My mom is still trying to indoctrinate my daughter. My mom still won't talk to me. Now, I've been lucky enough that all of my siblings are on the outside. So I had an aunt and 2 cousins and 3 siblings and a mother and a father on the inside, and others, I think. And now all of them, every one of them is on the outside except my mom. She's the last one. So I'm lucky because not everybody gets that. Not everybody gets to talk to every family member that they ever had except for one. Now that one person, that sucks. I'm not going to get to talk to my mom again, probably. And it's almost worse in some ways than her having died, because I know she's there. And I also know she doesn't want a relationship with me. It's not about the relationship we could have had if she had just lived longer. It's that she doesn't want to know me. And that's pretty painful.
Yeah,
it is
I agree. It's kind of worse than death in a way, because at least when someone dies, you think, well, they loved me, and we would have had a life together if it weren't for the fact that they've died. But when they're shunning you, it's like I liken it to Alzheimer's, that they're no longer in full control of their minds, and they're just kind of living out this existence, not knowing that all of their thoughts are being shaped for them by an external influence. And so to see your loved one kind of zombie-like going through these motions and allowing this cult to dictate their feelings for you is a heartbreaking thing to experience.
That's true. On the other hand, there is always that hope that maybe my mom will come out of it, or maybe my mom will continue being Jehovah's Witness, or decide to talk to me.
In that sense, it's not as bad as death, because there's always the chance that they'll snap out of it. Yeah.
Right. So it's I don't know. It's a rough situation. It's not fun at all. And I don't want anybody else to have to go through this, because it really is not fun. But I remember, so my mom talks to me every now and then. It's not often. And in fact, she's cracked down recently where she won't even, so she has my daughter's phone number and she calls her every now and then. But I feel like Kylie's old enough now that she's probably not going to be brainwashed into it again. So I'm okay with her talking to her, but my mom will not, she will hang up the phone if Kylie walks downstairs with the phone. She doesn't want to be anywhere in earshot of me, basically. She doesn't want to talk to me. She was kind of forced into being on the phone while downstairs the other day. She did not like it. Anyway.
I think you're more accommodating than I am, because Deanna and I have a zero tolerance attitude towards shunning, so that if we have JW relatives come to visit, because we have, Deanna's parents live in the same building and they're JWs, so we do have JWs come to the house, and we will not allow them to see Jessica unless they agree to see at least Deanna as well. If they say, well, we want to kind of separate Jessica from her parents and see her by herself, absolutely not. You're not allowed to do that. We come as a package. At the very least, you need to have her mother with her, and we will not allow you to normalize this behavior in front of our daughter. We don't want our daughter to grow up thinking that it's normal for this sort of thing to happen. So in a way, you're more accommodating than I am.
You're right. You're exactly right with that. And I did consider that. I thought about that really hard. The problem is that Kylie has had a relationship with my mom since she was born, because I wanted her to be Jehovah's Witness at the time, you know. And so it's kind of hard to.
It's hard to do a U-turn on that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to break it apart. Yeah, but so I ended up going up to Connecticut, where my mom lives, and seeing my grandparents, because they're not Jehovah's Witness. They've never been Jehovah's Witness. And my mom told me I could stay with her, surprisingly. This is years ago. It's probably a couple of years ago. So I ended up, of course, she did some weird things. Like, she wouldn't pray in front of me. She wouldn't study in front of me. She wouldn't do this thing or that thing, whatever. So I ended up staying in the living room. I was sleeping in the living room on an air mattress. She was sleeping in her bedroom, and Kylie was in another bedroom. So I'm asleep in the living room one morning, and I wake up to hear my mom talking, like indoctrinating Kylie. And she was looking at this magazine, and she was saying, "Look at these people. These people worship a necklace. Can you believe that? Isn't that strange?" And, the whole 9 yards. Just, she was saying, it's such an odd thing.
That would just be, that sends a chill down my spine just hearing you relate that. It really does, trouble me. That part.
It's crazy. So I'm laying there. Of course, she didn't realize I'm awake. I'm laying there hearing her indoctrinating my kid. And I think Kylie was probably 7. And so I stand up, and I was like, do you know the difference between Jehovah's Witnesses' God and those people's God? And Kylie said, what? And I said, those people's God, you can actually see and feel and know it's real, and know that it has a physical presence in the universe. Jehovah's Witnesses' God, you have no way of verifying that that's real. And my mom did not like that. I haven't really talked to her since then, really. But, that was where I drew the hard line. That is where I said, I can't live with her indoctrinating Kylie anymore. I told her I wanted her to leave Jehovah's Witnesses out of it completely, and she can have a relationship with her. But she's doing that whole theocratic warfare bit where she is okay with lying to me about it, telling me, okay, I won't talk to her about Jehovah, and then doing it anyways, because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to do, right?
The ends always justify the means.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a disgusting, wrong policy in its own right. So anyways, that's where I drew the hard line. I realized my mom was never going to, she was never going to stop talking about Jehovah, no matter how much she promised me she would. And that's when I said she can't go to Connecticut anymore for the summers. I was sending her up there for like a few weeks in the summer to hang out with my mom and my grandparents and things like that. That's where I drew the hard line. I think it's been a couple of years since she's been up there. So, it honestly hasn't been easy to do that U-turn. Honestly, has not been easy to put my foot down and say no. But she still talks to her on the phone. And I think Kylie realizes now that it's complete garbage. So I do remember a time when I think Kylie was 7 years old. She was telling me she wanted to get baptized. I was like, really? Why? That's odd. And she was saying, well, I just want to like get in a pool at the meeting. That's all I want to do.
I want to go for a swim.
Yeah, that's what it was. Like, that's peculiar.
Well, that's okay. We'll go to the pool. That's fine.
Yes, I said, you know what? That's fine. You can do that, but we're going to do it at Mama's church instead. Because that one won't shun you if you realize they're folded. But I was talking to my sister about this recently. And apparently her daughter said the same thing. She said she wanted to get in a pool at the meeting. I think that's the tactic my mom is using. She's not even trying to convince them of it anymore. She's like, forget it. I just want them baptized. That's it.
So you think that your mother is saying, you know, isn't it fun the way everyone
Yeah.
lines up to get in this pool? Wouldn't you like to be like them? Oh,
I
crazy.
suspect so. Of course, to get baptized, they have to believe it. I mean, they have to go through all this work and time and effort. But that is the thing that she's using to rope them in, I believe, based on the fact that, you know, we've heard this story twice. So
Everyone else is doing it. Why don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. It's that peer pressure bit again, you know.
Crazy. So obviously you mentioned that your siblings are out. How would you describe the reaction? Because obviously you now have a massive YouTube channel, you have a massive audience. So what's been the reaction to your activism work among your family members?
Well, my mom just found out actually about.
Only just found out.
Yeah, fairly recently. It's been about 3 months now.
Right.
But I ended up telling my brother and my brothers and my sister when I first started the channel. And they didn't put a whole lot of stock in it at first. They thought it was kind of a cathartic thing, and it ended up going somewhere. So I ended up getting them involved a little bit. Like my sister runs my Facebook page now and things like that. But they're really supportive. They're really supportive of everything I do. And so my brother was just telling me about the Jehovah's Witnesses expose by Leah Remini on her show. And he was like, I saw John Cedars on there. And I was like, oh, awesome. That's really great. So he recognized you. That's pretty cool. I think all my family watches you now. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Pass on my regards.
Yeah. Yeah. I watch your channel too. They're impressed. They're like, wow, you know, somebody that's famous. I mean, somebody that's reasonably famous went on Leah Remini's show and things like that. So they were pretty impressed that I know somebody like that. But anyway,
what did your mother say 3 months ago when she found out?
Well, I ended up. So my sister, bless her heart, has a big mouth sometimes. I love you, 6-bit. Anyway, she ended up telling some people inadvertently that, you know, some family members that were never Jehovah's Witness, and it ended up getting back to my mom. So my mom ends up just falling to pieces as far as I know. I mean, of course, I didn't talk to her about it really myself, but she was really, really unhappy about it and said, you know, possessed by Satan, mentally diseased, the whole bit. And so I ended up messaging my mom and just talking to her about it. And I said, you know, I do have a pretty big channel, and I do activism, and it's not just anti-Jehovah's Witness stuff. I talk about science, and I talk about extremism in all kinds of different ways. And I feel like it's something to be proud of. So I sent her a link to like a science video that I did. And I said that way you don't have to get any of the anti-Jehovah's Witness stuff. You could just look at my style and see my work and see what I do. And I don't know if she ever watched it or not, but she stopped talking to me after that. So she ended up, this is like 3 months ago. So she ends up coming to West Virginia for a visit because it was summertime. And I told her Kylie couldn't go up there. So she came down here to visit, and I dropped Kylie off with her and her Jehovah's Witness friend every day before, like, on my way to work, picked her up after. So I drop her off the first day I show up. And my mom comes over and talks to me. Now, remember, this is the first time in like 1.5 years, 2 years that she talked to me. And she tells me she loves me and that she's sorry that our relationship's been strained and she wants to fix that. And that, you know, talking to disfellowshipped family members isn't necessarily against the rules. You'll get counseled for it, but as far as I know,
yeah,
as long as
it's different. It's different if it's a non-relative, but if it's a relative, you basically get guilt tripped all the time with videos, but
Yeah.
it's not an actual disfellowshipping offense.
Right. So
Yeah.
I said that, like, you won't get disfellowship for talking to me as long as we don't talk about spiritual stuff and things like that. And it seemed like we were about to mend our relationship for like a day. And so anyways, I that's when I sent her a copy of one of my science videos to watch, and she was talking to me and things like that. And things seemed to be looking up. It was like she snapped out of it, and she was willing to talk to me for a day. And then shortly after that, just the very next day, she said, you don't love Jehovah, and I can't have any part in your life. All over again. It was just a complete 180. And it was really confusing. Like, where did all that come from? And that's where I drew another hard line. I said, you know what? You are failing me as a mother at this point. I know it's because of the whole brainwashing thing. I understand that you're not really in control of your own mind, but don't put me on this emotional roller coaster. Either be in my life or don't, you know? So that was a really sucky situation for a little while there. Luckily, I did have family members who understood the situation to talk to. I had my sister and my brothers to talk to, and they've been really supportive. And they know the kinds of things she does. They see that from her. They know that's her MO, kind of, in many cases. And then, of course, I had Kylie's grandparents to kind of help me through it. But that kind of emotional roller coaster is really hard to deal with. And it's not necessarily the result of Jehovah's Witnesses. The roller coaster isn't. The shunning bit, that's definitely the fault of Jehovah's Witnesses. But this is one of those things where it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses' fault. It's also my parents being who they are. That's been a little bit of a struggle on me. So
obviously, you mentioned that some of your videos touch on science. I think that's one of the great things about your channel, is that you don't focus necessarily just on Jehovah's Witnesses. You deal with other groups as well. You deal with, like you say, science and more broadly with atheism. You and I are both atheists, and at the risk of pissing off a percentage of my audience, I'm going to sort of talk to you a little bit about that. One of the things that I keep hearing particularly from Christians who stumble on my work, is that they'll say, oh, well, the reason why you're an atheist now is because you were never really a Christian, and you just happen to be raised in a non-Christian cult. If you'd have been raised as a Christian, you probably, and if you'd have only read the Bible properly, you probably wouldn't be an atheist. So how would you respond to that?
That's a rough one. I do hear that a lot. It's almost a little bit like Pascal's wager. The thing is, how can you know which religion is correct? Either, how many religions are there? There are thousands, 3,000, 4,000 religions out there. Somebody is always going to be able to tell you, you weren't raised in the correct religion. Somebody out there is going to be able to say that. Now, as far as which religion is correct, I don't know. I'm willing to accept that one of them might be. Many of them are mutually exclusive. I'm willing to listen to an argument. But if it's not convincing to me, if I see some kind of a logical fallacy in use or something, I'm tossing it out like all the rest. Simple as that. I think Richard Dawkins famously said something like, we're all atheists with respect to every God out there except for one. I went one God further. That may have been Michael Shermer. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's an apt saying. I just went one God further. I just stopped believing in Jehovah. I stopped believing in Yahweh. Simple as that.
It's a really good argument as well. It's actually, I kind of do a variation on that. I try different arguments, and I don't always get involved in arguments, but every now and then I'm feeling cheeky, you know.
Right.
And so something I'm increasingly saying is, why Jesus? Why not Lord Vishnu? You know,
Right.
How did you come to the realization that Lord Vishnu or one of the other members of the Hindu pantheon doesn't exist? What was your process for eliminating the existence of all of these gods? You know, why just Christianity? It's quite obvious to me that that your religion is at least partly due to the fact of you being born in a certain continent or in a certain culture, and that's one of the most interesting things I think about some of these arguments.
Yeah, that's very true. It's heavily dependent on where you're born, and you know, you don't have to be born into it to become a Christian. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I wasn't born into it, you know, so that's not the reason. It can't be the reason, because I wasn't born into it. I wasn't born a Christian. I was an atheist. I grew up an atheist. But you know, who are you around the most, especially in the US? I think 72% of the US is Christian, or somewhere in there. I know I got that statistic wrong. Just bear with me. And 44% believe that Noah's Ark is a real, literal story. So obviously, you were born
Sorry,
in
are you telling us that the Noah's Ark story didn't happen? This is...
I'm sorry to break it to you. Got bad news. Have you believed that this whole time? But anyway, so obviously, whether you were born in it or not, that's who you're around the most. You know, that you have the highest chances of becoming a Christian if you're in the US. So,
indeed. So, what's next for the Telltale channel?
Well, like I said, I won't stop doing this as long as there's air in my lungs, because there's somebody out there who needs it. There's somebody out there who will always need it. Somebody said to me recently that they felt like I was repeating myself. I don't really feel like that. I talk about all kinds of different subjects. I talk about I talk about extremism generally. I talk about Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, Catholicism, and just everything. Any cult or oppressive religion that you can imagine, I talk about. And I talk about science and all kinds of other subjects. So as I may be repeating myself to a certain extent on a certain level, people need this. This debate needs to continue. So I will continue doing this indefinitely as far as I'm concerned. As far as the Telltale channel goes, ultimately, I feel like the Telltale channel is just a starting point for me. I would really like to get into more mainstream activism. I would like to, I mean, I'm affecting people's lives, obviously. We're both affecting people's lives here on YouTube, but I feel like I'm disproportionately affecting the lives of young people, which is good. They need help too, because that's mostly who watches YouTube. But I would like to find a way to reach out into the community of people who are a little bit older, who are outside of YouTube, not really watching it. That's ultimately my goal. Anything I can do to help more people. And actually, I've talked about doing this. I do have intentions and plans, but I've kind of hoped to start a 501c3 corporation, like a nonprofit kind of thing where, I've talked to a lot of people who are, say, 16 and they get kicked out of their house. They don't have a cell phone. They don't have a cell phone. They don't have anything. In the end, I would really like to start some kind of an organization to donate money to these people. And I've put a pretty decent bit of thought into how I would do this. I'd supply cell phones and cell service for a year or something, or 2 years, or a year after they're 18 or something like that. And I'd give them a certain amount of money every month for that amount of time. Now, I don't know if it's feasible to do yet. Still investigating, but that's my ultimate plan, is something like that.
Well, who better to look into it than someone who's been in that situation themselves as a teenager? I think the only problem I can foresee is the sheer scale of the problem when you have 1 million Jehovah's Witnesses in America alone, that there are literally thousands of people who are affected. But I really applaud any efforts to ease the predicament of people in this situation. So if there's anything I can do, you know, you and I are in touch quite frequently, so please let me know.
I'll do that.
I just think it's remarkable the work that you're doing. I think that the more voices of reason we can have, the better. You were talking about repetition. I think you and I had a little exchange about this on Twitter. I actually think that repetition is sometimes needed, because just because we've used an argument before in one video doesn't mean everyone saw that video. Sometimes someone needs to hear that argument, or maybe they heard the argument before, but they need to hear it again, phrased slightly differently for it to sink in properly. So
yeah, that's very true. And also things get outdated quickly. So my videos change a lot. You know, I change my background, or I change my microphone or something, and it just sounds better. So saying it a second time is acceptable, I think. You know.
Indeed. So finally, what would be your message to any witnesses who have stumbled on this video, who might be at a stage where they're starting to entertain doubts?
I think my message would be, it's beyond just, so obviously the governing body members say we're just men, we're imperfect men, all that other stuff. If you take an objective look at the situation, it's beyond that. It's beyond just they're imperfect men. Okay, I could accept that if they were just imperfect men trying to do the best they can or whatever. You know, and honestly, I think that in some cases their intentions are pure, but they are wreaking havoc on people's lives. If you just take a look at this objectively, just step back and think about whether or not this is the best way to do things, and whether or not they really are helping people. Are they actually helping people with the 2-witness rule? Is that actually what the 2-witness rule was intended for? Was it actually intended for criminal offenses? Think about that stuff. Think about whether or not disfellowshipping is actually supported by the Bible. I know it looks like it is at its face, but read the verses, not just the verses Jehovah's Witnesses give you. Read other parts of the Bible. Try to investigate, see if the Bible really does support this or not. I mean, look at it from an objective standpoint, or as objective as possible. It's possible the Bible does support shunning. And if it does, I'll accept that. But let's take a look and find out, honestly, right? If you're questioning, just look at things objectively and honestly think, are the governing body members helping people? Does the Bible really say this? Those kinds of questions are what you should be investigating.
Indeed. I absolutely applaud those words and agree with them. But Telltale, I really appreciate you coming on the channel for this interview. I think a lot of people have found it very helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and maybe I'll get you on mine again one of these days.
Well, I would love it. Let's make that happen.
Okay, we'll do it.
So viewers, I do hope you have enjoyed this interview. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more interviews and indeed more videos of lots of different types. But I do hope you've enjoyed this, and as always, thank you for watching.